Is that him? Is that...
Coffee! I beg you, forgive me. I confess my sin. Please have mercy.
The calabash slipped from Nyasha's fingers as if the world itself had turned its hand. Palm wine splashed against the packed earth, and silver beads clinked, sounding like a small bell tolling. The music stopped so suddenly that the silence felt brutal, as if the drums themselves had been stunned into stillness. Nyasha stood frozen for one breath, and then the thing inside her that had been starving for confession broke. Her voice rose over the stunned hush, raw and cracked. "I will confess! I will confess!" The cry tore through the compound. Women's wails broke out like waves. Men dropped their talking drums. Guests who had been mid-dance stopped as if someone had pulled the sky down. Children scattered, mouths open, watching adults split into shocked faces. For a moment, nothing moved except the beads that had spilled from Nyasha's neck, slowly scattering across the ground. At the gate, Kofi's boots left muddy prints in the dust as he stepped forward. He looked as if he had climbed out of water and shadow, his white tunic still damp, his hair matted, his skin washed pale by river mist. He had the smell of riverweed and new rain. He had the slow, stubborn calm of a man returned from some place the world is not meant to see. Zuba staggered forward before anyone could stop her. Her feet were bare, her hair hung loose. She ran straight into his arms, the two of them collapsing into each other in a tangle of tears and murmured names. For all the noise, their reunion was a small, private thing. Two people who had lived on the same memory of one another. Around them, the village blurred into a slide of faces, astonishment, relief, suspicion. Nyasha's knees buckled, her beautiful wrapper fell loose, and she sank into the dust. The calabash lay near her, overturned, the wine staining the earth dark as old grief. She looked at Kofi as if he were a light that had come from her own vanity and burned her. Then she did what the whole compound had turned toward. She told the truth. "I went to the native doctor. I asked him for a charm. I wanted him to love me. Her voice stopped as a sob punched the air out of her lungs. "I took his picture. I gave it to Duma. He placed him in a bottle. I wrapped it and threw it into the river. I thought it would make him mine. I did not think it would take his life." Silence punched back like a leather strap. 1,000 hands reached for mouths at the same time. Zuba's face crumpled so that her features dissolved into the same salt that the calabash had spilled. Amadi, who had been waiting by the elders, white cloth still pressed across his chest for the marriage ritual, paled and stepped forward as if to claim something, but no one knew what a man must claim when truth had torn the walls off the world. "Kofi?" asked Chief Barima, older and steadier than most, voice like splinters of oak. "Is this true?" Kofi looked at Nyasha, looking not like a man furious, but like one who had been somewhere very cold and found his name warm on someone's lips. He was thin, the kind of thin that tells a story of long hunger. When he spoke, his voice came small but steady. I was trapped, he said. I knew days the size of a prayer. I watched the river move and thought I would dissolve. I heard voices and hated the sound. I remember Zuba's face like a lantern. That light kept me from vanishing. Whoever did this, he turned his eyes slowly toward Nyasha, made a jail of me. Nyasha pressed her palms to her face as if she could keep it shut. Her mother called her name and reached for her, but Nyasha pushed away her hand like a thing burned. There was a rawness in her that made everyone's stomachs tighten. The elders crowded forward, and Prophet Chike, a quiet man with a slow patience and a reputation like iron, raised his hand for order. "You confess in public," he said, voice like a river over stone. "That is good. Truth must be spoken before justice can be asked. Bring the bottle." Someone found the bottle. Someone always does. Small things have a way of coming forward when the world tilts. The glass lay in a farmer's woven basket, wrapped in brown cloth, edges still wet. The hunter Udogwu had found it the night before, tangled in watergrass, and had not dared open it. He had brought it to Prophet Chike, who had prayed over it through the dark. When they unwrapped it now, the bottle was damp, and the light inside had gone. It looked ordinary as a jar in sunlight, but a hush doubtless comes from the memory of what had been inside and what had already been done. Prophet Chike set the bottle on the carved stool in the center of the compound and looked Nyasha in the face. "Tell us everything. Tell the elders where you went and whom you spoke to." Nyasha's voice came in pieces. She told them of the shrine hidden between the silver palms, of Duma, the man whose skin smelled of bark and whose eyes held a canyon of old prayers. She told them how greed had coiled in her chest, how the charm had not read the difference between desire and love. She told them finally that she had tossed the bottle into the river and the river had returned it. When she said that last part, the elder Odogwu, who had found the bottle, stepped forward and explained in his steady voice how he had seen it float by the bend that morning, how he had taken it, feeling a chill in the bones as if it had a heartbeat, how he had carried it to Prophet Chike to lift any wrong as a man lifts a spear of porridge. The crowd listened, and as the story knitted itself to its completion, faces grew brighter and paler by turns. Many absolved her with the speed of people who live by impossible love. Others drew back as if they had been burned. The shape of it all was a wound and a gift at once. A man returned, a woman undone, a village that had to decide whether mercy would be the law. Prophet Chike spoke slowly. "The law of the spirits is old, but the law of the people today will be what we decide. We will do what must be done, but first we must right the wrong." He called for the elders to form a circle. They placed the bottle on a flat stone and set a small lamp beside it. The lamp's flame shivered gold like the truth it was there to watch. "Kofi," the prophet said, turning to the man who had been held in glass. "Speak for yourself. What did you suffer?" Kofi's eyes had a long look in them. He breathed in as if beginning a prayer and said, "I lived in a hollow time. My voice was small. I thought I was going mad because time had stopped. I was thirsty for towns, and I walked through the dream of the bottle. When night came, I would think of Zuba's laugh. That thought kept me from breaking entirely. To know how much someone loves you is to have been saved by them, even when you do not know it. I felt that like a rope at my waist. There was a soft sound, not a laugh, but a shared intake around the circle. Zuba, whose grief had been a quiet thing until now, stepped forward and placed both hands on Kofi's face. "Do you forgive?" She whispered into the small of him, as if to confirm there was a living thing below the skin. Kofi bowed his head and let his forehead rest against hers. "I forgive, because I cannot spend my life planting more sorrow." The forgiveness fell like cool water. Some people seemed relieved. Others seemed dismayed. Forgiveness does not forget, but it loosens the hands of the present. The elders murmured among themselves, "Justice in a village is a weight carried by everyone." Prophet Chike lifted his staff and said, "Nyasha spoke the truth. That is the first step to repair. But truth must be followed by right work. The spirits are not mockable. They return what we have sent them." He declared that Nyasha's confession had saved her from immediate exile and invoked the old way, service and restoration. "Nyasha of Macondo," he said plainly, "you must go to the house of the prophet and serve. For 7 seasons you will attend the sick, you will sweep the sacred places, you will carry water from the river and kneel at the shrine each full moon. Your work will be a journey toward healing so that your envy cannot find a home in you again. You will be a living warning for our children." Nyasha bowed her head, sobbing. She had expected a harsher end. Perhaps in some corner of her mind she had hoped for that too. The service would be a slow unmaking of the arrogance that had fed her. It would also, the elders hoped, be a ladder back to life. Kofi and Zuba were given shelter in the house of Zuba's mother that night. They sat under the baobab while the moon was a pale coin overhead. The villagers put offerings at the shrine. The drums resumed the next day, but softer, for they now beat for mercy. The weeks that followed were strange and tender. The harvest kept coming because the earth does not forget its duties. Market days returned, and with them the small chatter of trade. But every time a young woman braided her friend's hair near the river, an old woman's story would stop her and say, "Look well to whom you love, child. Keep your hands from what should not be taken." Nyasha left the village at dawn the next week. Her mother clutched at her, but she had resolved filial duty into a quiet exit. She walked with bare feet and a small bundle. She had been told to go to Prophet Chike's compound and to remain there under his watch. She did as she was told, and in the first months her service was a penance plain as bread. Sweep the courtyard, carry the herds, wash the mats, sing the repentance psalms as she worked. In time, the work changed her. It does not make an evil heart pure like rain makes the soil. It makes a person able to notice where the earth has been trampled. Nyasha's face softened as she lifted pots for the sick. She sat with old men and listened to their stories of love and regret. She taught little girls the old songs. People who had once spat at her now let her cross their thresholds to fetch their salts. Kindness came like a slow trickle. She had to relearn how to let others live without wanting them for herself. Kofi and Zuba meanwhile lived in a new, careful tenderness. Kofi did not rush to reclaim grandness. He had seen the smallness of being bound and had learned what it meant to be grateful for breath. Together he and Zuba planted a patch of corn near the river and tended it daily. The children of the compound came to watch them teach the seedlings how to stand. Some evenings Zuba would stand by the water and touch it, and say nothing. Kofi would stand behind her and fold her hand into his. At the market, some people would still whisper, "There is always talk, truths live in mouths." But the narrative had shifted. There was a man who had been lost and had come back. There was a woman who had fallen and been bound to the work of healing, and there was an entire village that had been made part of the story. That was a dangerous thing. Stories remake how a village believes in itself. When the rains came that season, soft and forgiving, the river shone like a mirror that had not been cracked. People painted calabashes and danced again, but this time with more care. They celebrated Zuba and Kofi's marriage months later, a quiet ceremony with only those who loved them most. Prophet Chike blessed the marriage and said a short prayer that did not call for vengeance but for vigilance. Watch your hearts, tend your wants, live with the understanding that the spirit of envy can creep into the gentlest of hands. Nyasha served out her appointed seasons. Her redemption was not a sudden conversion, it was a slow reweaving. She learned to sit with the kind of grief that does not gush outward but still needs tending. She learned to look at children as if each one was a story to be protected, not a prize to be won. She scrubbed floors until her knuckles panged and carried water until her hips grew steady for the walk. There were months when she wanted to run from herself. There were nights when she thought the river would call her back. But she stayed. Service is not easy. It builds a sturdier spine. Years later, when the elders were past their power and the children of Kofi and Zuba ran barefoot beneath the baobab, the tale of the bottle had settled into the scaffolding of village lore. Mothers told it to their daughters like a warning, but they also told it like a prayer, that the world can heal if a person chooses to be mended. The bottle, opened and emptied that day in the compound, was sealed and stored in Prophet Sheik's house, where it sat in a wooden chest and shimmered faintly under the full moon, as if the moonlight still found a story in glass. There was no neatness to the way people moved forward. Nyasha never again found Amadi at her side. He had been shamed and drifted to a different market, where he married a trader's daughter and started a small store. She did not beg for him, nor did she weep for him. Instead, she buried herself in others until the act of helping stopped being a punishment and became the work of her hands. It was not that she became saintly. She learned the language of humility, how to say, "I was wrong," and then, after the saying, to do the slow work of being better. Kofi and Zuba raised their children without the tangled roots that had once choked them. They taught them the river songs and the names of herbs. They taught them how to say sorry. Sometimes, when the moon was full, Kofi would go to the place where the bottle had first been found, kneel in the grass, and whisper thanks to the river. Zubo would stand beside him, and they would both listen for the thin old voice of the water, whispering back the long lesson. Do not let greed grow where love should be planted. Guard your heart. Watch your hands. One season, a traveler came through the village and asked for Prophet Sheik's counsel. The prophet, older now, smiled at the boy and went to his chest where the bottle lay. He took it out and handed it to the traveler briefly, not because it should be taken lightly, but because every object wants to keep teaching. The traveler begged for a story, and Sheik told him that one. A man in a bottle, a woman who had sought love with knives, and a village that learned to braid their hearts back together. The traveler left with the bottle in his memory, but empty in his arms. When he crossed the next river, he told a story to his children that was laced with mercy and warned, "Be careful what you wish, and careful how you reach for it." So the tale spread, and with it, the village of Macondo became a place known both for a terrible thing and the way they cleaned up after it, like a family that keeps the house tidy so the wounds may heal in time. On nights when the river would make a small melody and the frogs laid out a chorus, old women would look out from their huts and nod at each other, saying to the children who were listening, "We will not be jealous of what our sister holds. We will hold our own branches and feed the seedlings with our hands." The children would giggle, braids swinging, and the baobab's leaves would rattle like an old woman's comb. Some blessings are learned at long distance. Some are taught by the pain of living. Nyasha's name moved through the village in the years that followed with a strange two-sided quality. It was a story told to frighten and a story told to encourage. It was the sound of a woman who had once desired wrongly and did not let that desire become the shape of her life. When Prophet Sheikh finally died, and the village held him with the quiet proper to a man who had straightened crooked things, the people of Macondo gathered and told one another the old story again, each voice adding a small color: the hunter's steadiness, the prophet's long patience, the river's indifference and mercy. They placed a wooden plaque near the river with a short line carved into it. "Here we learned that envy makes a bottle of the heart. Fill yours with gratitude." Years later, on a night when the moon was high and children lay asleep and the river flowed noiselessly, an older Nyasha passed by that plaque. She had traveled far from the place of her shame, but had always been tied to it by the slow thread of service. She paused, touched the carved letters, and whispered a small prayer into the night's cool mouth. "May those who come after me be gentler in their wanting." She walked on, a soft figure under the stars, moving like a person whose work had been done and whose mistakes had been used to make something whole. So the village of Macondo kept living. Men sold cattle and women braided hair. The seasons cycled and the river moved on. But sometimes, in the lull between dusk and night, when the air smelled of fresh fire and smoke, the elders would call the children and say, "Listen, once a woman's wanting built a bottle, and a river returned it. But more than that, listen, it is possible to be mended. Speak the truth. Do great work for small reasons. Love with hands open." And that is the second part of the story, where a confession shakes a village, a river returns what was stolen, a man forgives, and the woman who did the wrong learns to spend her life putting back what she broke. It does not end with thunder or fireworks. It ends with the quietness of a place that goes on, a people who plant, and the small moral that grows up like a tree in the middle of a village yard. Guard your heart, or your heart will become a bottle. Thank you so much for watching Zita's Stories. Your love and support mean everything. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe for more powerful African stories. New episodes drop every Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday by 7 p.m. Nigerian time.